Hey everyone, it's me, Aaron, and 2 weeks ago I was at New York Comic Con and I had a wonderful time. I got to see so many creative, talented people, perused Artist Alley, spent way too much money, and I got to meet so many fans. This was hands down the most fans that I had ever met at any convention, and I just had to come in here real quick and say, every single one of you were a delight to talk to. Every single person that I ran into at the con, you were so nice, so friendly. You said so many wonderful things about the channel, and I just wanted to say that picked me up. That was the highlight of my entire weekend. So thank you to every single person who I had an interaction with. Even if it was just a small, quick thing, it meant the world to me. So thank you very much to everybody that I got a chance to talk to at New York Comic Con. Speaking of people that I got a chance to talk to at New York Comic Con, how's that for a segue? This was the very first time that I went to New York Comic Con, and I thought, you know what? Let me see if I can get a couple interviews in. I met so many wonderful creators at the convention, and a couple of them I really wanted to do an interview with, and they were more than happy to help. So we've got 2 interviews coming up, and for the first one, we got a chance to interview Jim Zub. This is a man with a truly epic resume. Wayward, Skullcatchers, Glitter Bomb, Samurai Jack, Champions, Avengers No Surrender, which, if you know me, is one of my personal favorite Avengers stories of all time. And those aren't even the books that he's working on right now. He has done so many impressive works throughout his career, so it was a real honor to get a chance to sit down and talk with him. So I hope you guys enjoy our interview with Jim Zub, and after the interview, stick around and I'll tell you about the next interview that I have coming up from New York Comic Con. Hi, we're still at New York Comic Con, and I'm here with Jim Zub, who I have often described as the hardest working man in comics. Because you always have about like 4 or 5 projects going and then like 3 more that are on the way. Can you just tell me like what are the ones that you're, well, I was going to say what are the ones you're most excited about right now, but it's probably all of them. But yeah, if you want to do a quick rundown.
Sure. So for Marvel right now I'm doing Black Panther and the Agents of Wakanda. I've got Conan's Serpent War coming out as well. And I've got another secret Marvel project that's going to be announced, I think in 3 or 4 weeks. At IDW, I'm doing the Dungeons & Dragons Infernal Tides and Rick and Morty versus D&D 2, which is a co-production between Oni Press and IDW. And that's what's on my docket right now, yeah.
That is so, wow, I'm exhausted just hearing all of those. This is one, okay, I don't know if it's appropriate to ask creators this question, but do you have any tips for time management for...
Fear is a very powerful motivator. No, it's like, I think for me, one of the most powerful things I learned was being able to accurately gauge how long something's going to take if I'm concentrating, turn the social media off, and just like head down work. Breaking a story takes quite a bit of time because you try to figure out all the moving parts. Some writers are organizers, planned writers, and other writers are pants writers. They by the seat of their pants, right? So they know the vague idea, but they don't quite know where it's going until they put it down on paper. I don't know if it's my animation background or just like fastidiousness, but I'm a planner, so I know where the story's going. I'll literally build it very tightly and then make even a page pacing. I know how many pages this scene is going to be. I know where all the scenes stack up and what the cliffhanger is going to be for the whole arc. And so once I have that plan, I find scripting relatively quick. What's really tough is if I have 2 or 3 stories I'm trying to break simultaneously, that's where my brain kind of starts to shatter. But if it's just scripting, if I've got all my stuff approved and I know what I'm doing, I can script multiple books, in a week if I need to. And so it's like, that's really for me where the time management comes, is figuring out those blocks of time and being able to go, okay, tonight I need to get this much done or the whole log jam starts and it's going to fall apart, right? So for me, I have a pretty set writing schedule. I go into my office, close the door, and I'm not coming out till this much gets done, you know what I mean? And the sooner the better, but if I'm focused, I know I can get done, X number of pages in an hour or 3 hours or whatever it's going to be. So for me, it's like any skill that you want to get better at, it takes practice. If you wanted to be a professional basketball player, you would wake up early and you would dribble the ball and you'd shoot from the 3-point line and you'd practice passing and until it becomes instinctive, right? Art is the same way. So writing, music, acting, you get better at it by doing it, and I didn't fully appreciate that, I think, for the first few years of doing this, where you're really grinding it out and you feel like, man, every page feels like a war. And now I'm like, okay, I kind of have a feel for where the story is working and what's not working as I'm building it. I also get a sense of, people ask me, they're like, well, don't you have, writer's block, or don't you get afraid and freaked out you can't do it? And I do, like anybody else. The difference is when you've done the dark night of the soul on a project and you're like, I suck, everything sucks, this is the worst, and you come out the other side enough times, you literally recognize that it's happening. So I will now say to myself, oh crap, this is the part where I think I can't do it, but I will, and I always do, but I hate this part. I hate this feeling that I suck and I can't do it. I wish I didn't have that feeling anymore. I still get it like everybody else, but now I know to keep pushing because I have enough evidence that I will come out the other side. And so that's one of those weird things that you can't even teach people. You kind of have to have endured it enough to get through it, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's like a difference between when you're actually in trouble and when your brain is just telling you you're in trouble.
It's like a fight or flight thing. You're like, oh, this is the scary part. And some people will just fold because they haven't been through it enough, I think. But it's like, I guess I've traumatized my writer brain enough that I could force it to the other side of that.
You have mental calluses, basically?
Mental calluses is a really good description. So it is about multitasking, and in some ways having multiple projects going at the same time is sort of an advantage, because if I do get stuck on one, there's always something else that's got to get done, right? So I'll push this off my plate right now and I'll look at something else, and when you come back with a fresh set of eyes, the possibilities open up again. Like you go, oh, why didn't I notice these two things connect so well? Thematically, I can bring that idea back, or emotionally, this is a really good bit. Why didn't I notice that before? But those connections come back because you took a breather from it and you just, turn it back around. So sometimes that can be really helpful, because I always have 2, 3, 4 projects going. I can just go, I'm going to work on this, come back to the other one later. Yeah.
And I want to talk to you about your IDW work, because it's a lot of Dungeons & Dragons stuff, but also when I look at your independent stuff, your creator-owned stuff, a lot of it tends to take influence from like that fantasy world. So you clearly have a love for Dungeons & Dragons. I've even seen you doing stuff like Critical Role before. So when did this love for Dungeons & Dragons begin with you?
Oh man, I started playing D&D when I was 8 years old. My brother was 12, and that doesn't seem like a big gap, but it is, because there's 4 years between us. That's half my life when I'm 8. Oh, yeah. So D&D was honestly a way for my brother Joe and I to communicate with each other, and really we bonded over it. It was the first thing I recall us doing that we had a shared purpose like that, and we felt like brothers. Joe was the dungeon master and I was the player, and it was the first time in my life that I felt like I had a voice, that he wanted to hear what I had to say, and I had to listen to him as well. And our friends, our cousins, the people that we played with. I was always the youngest, but in D&D you get your turn, and I would get my chance to come up with an idea or roll the dice and entertain everyone at the table. It gave me a love of storytelling. It gave me a love of building characters, and it kind of changed my life. I would not be a writer now without D&D, and that's why it's so intrinsic to so much of what I do. And the ability to work on the official stuff now is like reconnecting to my youth constantly. I've told the D&D developers like I wouldn't be where I am today without them, And so as a creative exercise, I think it's really beautiful and wonderful collaborating with other people and making stories. And that's something that I want to instill in other people as much as possible, So yeah.
We also didn't talk about Stone Star. I called it Starstone. Sorry, Stone Star. Yeah.
This is the book I did at Amazon earlier this year for Comixology Originals. So it's a creator-owned book that I did with Max Dunbar, who's doing the D&D comic with me now. So it's this really fun kind of space fantasy. The way you'd almost describe it is it's like a YA gladiator in space. It's essentially, Stone Star is a mobile gladiatorial arena that flies from planet to planet bringing entertainment and danger. And this kid named Dale, he's an orphan who's grown up on the ship, and he ends up discovering a secret that he's not supposed to know about, and now he's being hunted, and he needs to figure out whether he escapes or whether he sort of fights back, whether he gets involved in the gladiatorial stuff or whether it destroys him. Yeah.
And I know it had one arc, and now it's like on a little bit of a break, but now you have like a second one that's already been confirmed?
Yeah, so we re-upped with Comixology. We're going to be doing a second story in 2020. And in the meantime, Max and I are doing Dungeons & Dragons Infernal Tides, which is really just good fun for both of us because both of us have been doing work for D&D. So Max and I are like attached at the hip now, doing all kinds of really fun projects, commercial stuff and creator owned. Yeah.
It's always good to get that one creator who you can like just pair up with, like the true you know you have a history, you sync up. Let's talk about some of the stuff that you're doing over at Marvel. You got the new Conan book that was announced, and that seems to be, they're really digging in deep with Conan there, because I know a little bit about Conan, but when I saw some of the characters coming in there, I was familiar with them, but I thought, they're only getting Conan back in there, they're not getting everybody. But you look at that and you go, oh, you got everybody in this thing. So how much of a history do you have with Conan?
It's so weird. I was telling people earlier today, the three things that defined my youth were Marvel superheroes, Conan the Barbarian, and Dungeons & Dragons. And not just in my career, but literally this summer, I've been working on all three of them simultaneously, and that does not feel real. It's an absolute dream. Being able to do new Conan stories has been awesome. I did the Avengers No Road Home, bringing Conan into the Marvel Universe, but then I did 3 issues of Savage Sword of Conan just recently over the summer. Now, thanks to that really impressed the Conan Properties people, and they asked me if I was interested in doing something with some of their other characters, specifically Solomon Kane and Dark Agnes. So we kind of put together this almost Crisis on Infinite Howards, like this Robert E. Howard mix using an obscure character named James Allison. He's this character, he's only been in like 2 complete stories and some fragments. He is very meta. He's like a person living in the modern era, well, modern at Howard's time, so it's the 1930s, who has been reincarnated multiple times through existence, and he's been a hero in all these different ages. And so he has these lucid dreams about his past lives and can feel them and see them and live them again in the modern time. And so he's become kind of the connective tissue for this story called Serpent War. So you've got James Allison, you've got Solomon Kane, Dark Agnes, Conan, and Moon Knight, who has a funky crossover because of Set. Set, the snake god, Khonshu, and then you got Set, the same evil in the time of Conan. Yeah, so it's a really fun kind of mix.
Even as we've been sitting here doing the interview, we've had many people come up and get signatures, and we just had a guy come up from Germany, give this like very heart-touching exchange with you. So I just wanted to ask, you've been doing cons for a long time. What are like some of your favorite experiences that you've had just with, I don't want to say customers, but con attendees, just, yeah.
I think when people on my website, I do a lot of tutorials about how to write comics, how to pitch comics. And originally I did it as sort of a way, people would ask me on Twitter or social media, how do you do this? And I'm like, I'm still figuring it out, but maybe if I write it down, it'll make sense to me. And when people bring me the books they've made and they say, I wouldn't have made this if I didn't read your blog or if I didn't, feel like it was possible. That's been really an amazing experience. People bring me something they made that exists because I encourage people to make stuff, Those are really, really special. Meeting some of the creators whose work I grew up with, and I've had these weird moments where I introduce myself and they go, I know who you are. And I'm like, no, that's not possible. Like that actually can't be, because I'm still a big kid and none of this feels real, Those are amazing moments as well. Just those kinds of experiences. People saying that they got back into comics because of something that I wrote, or they're collecting now and they get their friends into it because of something I wrote, or they have a particular panel or a page that meant something to them. When they tell you those stories, that it is now part of their story, and that you've had an effect on them, no matter where you are or the distance geographically or time, this stuff means stuff to people. You know, that I had a guy come to me, we did No Surrender, the weekly Avengers book, and this like really old dude, like older than my dad, comes over, drops this pile of 16 issues of Avengers in front of me, and he goes, "Kid, I've been reading this since Lee and Kirby." And I'm like, "Yeah?" And he goes, "This is good. Keep doing this." I'm like, "Yes, sir." Nice. And you're like, that's like the best compliment. Like some guy who's been doing this, reading longer than I've been alive, telling me that you're doing it right. You know, we're part of a really cool legacy, and it's amazing that this stuff is now in the public eye the way it is. But it stretches back all these decades, 80 years with Marvel this year, and that we're a small part of that, and keeping that kind of fire going is cool. And that doesn't mean it's easy or it's always the way you want it to be, but the vast majority of the time, I'm still kind of a big kid and in love with it, And the shows are tiring and exhausting, and you wear your throat out, but we do it because we love it, and that's what's so cool about it. People being passionate about these characters reminds me why I am, that's all. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and it's just been a pleasure getting to talk with you. Thank you guys very much for tuning in, and we have another interview coming up in just a second. I hope you guys enjoyed that interview. I just had to come in here one more time and say it was a real honor to get a chance to sit down and talk to Jim Zub. He was a super nice guy, so it was a pleasure to get a chance to interview you. And as I said, that wasn't the only interview that I did at New York Comic Con. Coming up later today is our second interview, which was with the writer of Spencer and Locke, David Pepose. Now, if you guys have watched this channel for a while, you know that Spencer and Locke is a book that I have been hyping up for a while, and I have heard back from many of you guys who have gone out there and picked the book up. You have really enjoyed it. You guys have been floored by this series, and I am so happy to hear that. So if you want to see that interview, then make sure that you click that subscribe button or follow us on Twitter at Professor Thorgy, so that way you know when the interview goes up. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Come back next time.